I'm Jessica Morgan, 32, and a year ago I abandoned my marketing executive position in New York to care for my mother after her stage 3 cancer diagnosis. Mom and I were always close, even when miles apart, and I never imagined anything could fracture our family during this crisis. I certainly never expected that after 12 months of round-the-clock caregiving, my father and stepmother would hand me an itemized bill until they saw what I had prepared for them in return. Before I tell you how my own parents tried to charge me for caring for my dying mother, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and unexpected redemption. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was standing in my corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, celebrating with my team after landing the Thompson account, a 7-figure deal that had taken months of strategic planning. My phone vibrated on the conference table, my mother's smiling face lighting up the screen. Unusual for her to call during work hours. "Mom," I answered, stepping away from the champagne toast. Her voice was unnaturally steady. "Jessica, I need to tell you something important." The words that followed, stage 3 pancreatic cancer, aggressive treatment plan, uncertain prognosis, shattered the trajectory of my carefully constructed life in an instant. Mom and I had always maintained our close relationship despite the geographical distance. Our Sunday evening calls were sacred, often stretching into hours of conversation. During holidays, I'd fly home, and we'd bake her famous apple pie together, a tradition since my childhood. We shared everything: her gardening triumphs, my workplace victories, her book club dramas, my dating disasters. When my relationship with Tyler became serious, she was the first person I called. 3 days after her call, I found myself sitting in my parents' formal living room, a space that had always felt more like a museum than a home. My father, Robert, a successful investment banker, sat stiffly beside my stepmother, Pamela. Mom sat alone in an armchair, looking suddenly small and pale. "Margaret needs professional care," my father said, flipping through a glossy brochure for an upscale nursing facility. "I've already made inquiries." Pamela nodded. "It's the sensible solution. We're both so busy, and the staff there are trained for this specific situation." I watched my mother's face fall slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I understand," she said quietly. "You both have your lives to lead." Something fierce and protective rose in my chest. "What about what Mom wants?" I asked. "Have you even asked her?" My father looked annoyed. "Jessica, this isn't about emotions. It's about practicality. Your mother needs round-the-clock medical attention. And I suppose you can't adjust your golf schedule to provide that." The words escaped before I could stop them. My stepmother's perfectly lined lips thinned. "That's unfair, Jessica. We're trying to provide the best care possible." I turned to my mother. "Mom, what do you want?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I'd prefer to stay home if possible, but I understand it's a lot to ask." That night in my hotel room, I made a series of calls that would alter the course of my life. First to my boss, Catherine, explaining the situation and requesting a 6-month leave of absence. She was sympathetic but concerned. "Jessica, you're on track for the VP position. I can hold your spot for 3 months, maybe 4, but beyond that." Next was Tyler, my boyfriend of 2 years. We'd been discussing moving in together, maybe even marriage. "I need to go take care of my mom," I explained. His response was lukewarm at best. "For how long? Can't your dad handle it? Or hire someone?" "She's my mother, Tyler. And I'm your partner. We had plans." The conversation ended with vague promises to make long-distance work, but something had shifted between us, revealing a foundational crack I hadn't noticed before. The final call was to my landlord, arranging to sublet my apartment. By morning, I had packed 2 suitcases with essentials, put the rest in storage, and started the drive to my hometown of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. When I arrived at my mother's house, the reality of her condition hit me like a physical blow. Always vibrant and active, she now moved slowly, wincing with each step. Her chestnut hair, the same shade as mine, had already started thinning from the initial treatments. Yet she smiled when she saw me, arms outstretched. My Jessica, she said, holding me tight. You didn't have to come. Yes, I whispered into her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. I absolutely did. The guest room in my mother's house became my new home. I unpacked the essentials for my city life: laptop, professional clothes I'd rarely use, and framed photos of a life now on pause. The small desk by the window became my command center, covered with medical terminology flashcards, appointment schedules, and insurance paperwork. Learning to be a caregiver happened overnight. I created spreadsheets tracking medications, dosages, timing, side effects. I learned to distinguish between normal post-chemo symptoms and those requiring immediate medical attention. The language of cancer became my second tongue: neutropenia, neuropathy, infusion ports, antiemetics. The first chemotherapy appointment revealed how unprepared I truly was. I drove Mom to the cancer center, trying to maintain a positive attitude, discussing a novel she'd been reading. The treatment room was unexpectedly bright and cheerful, with recliners instead of hospital beds. But watching the nurse insert the 4-line into my mother's arm, seeing the clear liquid that would simultaneously fight and ravage her body, I felt my composure cracking. You can step out if you need to, the nurse said kindly, noticing my expression. Mom squeezed my hand. Are fine, Oni? This is the medicine I need. The aftermath was worse than either of us anticipated. For 3 days following treatment, Mom couldn't keep food down. I learned to prepare bland foods, to recognize the precise moment when nausea medication was needed, to help her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk alone. My father and Pamela visited occasionally, bringing expensive fruit baskets Mom couldn't eat, and staying just long enough to ask perfunctory questions about her treatment. They never arrived during the difficult days post-chemotherapy, always timing their visits when Mom was having a good day. Your father finds this difficult, Mom explained after they left one Sunday afternoon. He's never been good with illness. And Pamela? I asked, adjusting Mom's pillows. She smiled faintly. Pamela is good at being married to your father. While Mom slept, I attempted to maintain some connection to my professional life. I joined conference calls from the hospital waiting room, edited presentations while monitoring Mom's temperature, and answered emails during the rare quiet moments. Catherine was supportive, but increasingly concerned about client relationships. They're asking for you specifically, Jessica, she said during one call. I can only deflect for so long. One night, 6 weeks into our new routine, Mom's temperature spiked to 103 degrees. I rushed her to the emergency room at 2 a.m., terrified by her disoriented state and shallow breathing. Neutropenic fever, the emergency doctor explained. Her white blood cell count is dangerously low from the chemotherapy. She'll need to be admitted. I called my father from the hospital corridor. I have an important meeting in the morning, he said, voice thick with sleep. Keep me updated. Mom remained hospitalized for 5 days. I slept in a chair beside her bed, leaving only to shower quickly at home. My father visited once, for 30 minutes between appointments, bringing a small bouquet and awkward conversation. The financial reality of my situation became impossible to ignore. My savings were depleting rapidly. The leave of absence from work had transitioned to part-time remote status, cutting my income by more than half. Medical copays, specialized foods, transportation costs, and countless incidentals created a steady drain on my resources. Meanwhile, my father continued his unchanged lifestyle. During one of his brief visits, he mentioned casually that he'd purchased a new Mercedes. The lease was up on the BMW, he explained, showing Mom pictures on his phone. I bit my tongue, remembering how I'd put off refilling my own prescription because of cost concerns, how I'd been calculating grocery expenses down to the penny. Despite the hardships, there were moments of profound connection with my mother. On good days, we'd sit in her garden, identifying birds at the feeder. She taught me to crochet, laughing at my clumsy initial attempts. We watched old movies, reciting favorite lines together. During one such evening, as Audrey Hepburn danced across the screen, Mom turned to me. "This time with you," she said softly, "is the unexpected gift in all this darkness." 3 months into caring for Mom, The relative stability we'd established began to crumble. Her oncologist, Dr. Patel, called me into his office after her latest scan. "The tumor isn't responding as we'd hoped," he explained gently. "We need to try a more aggressive approach." The new treatment protocol meant more frequent hospital visits, stronger side effects, and a substantially higher level of care at home. I sent an email to Catherine that evening, explaining that I could no longer maintain even part-time work responsibilities. "I understand," she replied. "Your position will be here when you're ready to return, though I can't promise for how long. Take care of yourself, Jessica." The daily caregiving routine intensified dramatically. Mom's neuropathy worsened until she could barely hold a fork or button a shirt. I began cutting her food into tiny pieces, helping her dress, and assisting with showers. The indignities of cancer stripped away her privacy and independence, yet she faced each new limitation with remarkable grace. "I changed your diapers once upon a time," she joked weakly as I helped her to the bathroom. "I suppose we've come full circle." My father and Pamela's visits became increasingly rare. 2 weeks passed without a single appearance. Their excuses ranged from business trips to social obligations. When I called to update them on Mom's deteriorating condition, the conversations were brief and detached. After a particularly difficult chemotherapy session, when Mom had been too weak to walk to the car and I had to request a wheelchair, I reached my breaking point. I drove directly to my father's office. His secretary tried to stop me. "Mr. Morgan is in a meeting." I pushed past her into his corner office, where he sat alone reviewing documents. "Jessica," he said, frowning. "This is unexpected." "So is cancer," I replied. "Mom needed you today. Where were you?" He shuffled papers on his desk. "I'm extremely busy with work. You know that." "Too busy for your wife of 30 years who's fighting for her life." "That's unfair. I'm handling the financial aspects of her care." "Are you?" I challenged. "Because I've been managing her insurance claims, and there seem to be coverage gaps you haven't addressed." His expression hardened. "I pay the premiums." "That's not enough, Dad. She needs you physically present, not just her checkbook." He glanced at his watch. "I have a golf meeting with clients in 20 minutes. "Golf meeting," I repeated incredulously. "While I'm bathing your wife because she's too weak to stand in the shower." "You chose to be her caregiver, Jessica," he said dismissively. "No one forced you." I left his office, shaking with anger and disbelief. That evening, I discovered a stack of unprocessed insurance claims in Dad's home office while searching for Mom's policy details. Some were months old, with denial notices attached. I spent hours on the phone with insurance representatives, learning that several treatments had been denied because the proper pre-authorization forms hadn't been submitted. "These should have been addressed immediately," the customer service representative explained. "Now we'll need to file appeals." The toll of constant caregiving began manifesting physically. I lost 15 pounds without noticing. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. I caught myself falling asleep while sitting upright beside Mom's bed. My hair started coming out in clumps when I showered, stress-related, according to Mom's nurse. One night, after administering Mom's evening medications, I sat beside her bed, holding her hand until she fell asleep. Suddenly, she opened her eyes, looking confused. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "It's me, Mom. Jessica." She frowned. "I don't know you. Where's my daughter?" "I am your daughter," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," she insisted, becoming agitated. "I want Jessica." I called Dr. Patel's after-hours line, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "Confusion can be a side effect of the pain medication," he explained. "It should pass by morning." I sat in the hallway outside her room and sobbed silently, mourning this new loss, the cognitive clarity that cancer was now stealing alongside her physical health. By morning, Mom was lucid again, with no memory of the incident. I never told her about it, adding it to the growing list of burdens I carried silently. 6 months into my caregiving journey, the email from Catherine arrived. Subject line: Position elimination, important information. Corporate restructuring. Downsizing. Strategic realignment. The carefully crafted HR language couldn't disguise the reality. I no longer had a job to return to. The severance package was generous, 3 months' salary plus extended health benefits, but the timing couldn't have been worse. My savings had dwindled to nearly nothing, and Mom's treatments were entering a new, experimental phase not fully covered by insurance. I began using credit cards for essential expenses, groceries, gas, utilities. Each swipe felt like another step toward a financial cliff edge, but there were no alternatives. Mom needed specialized nutrition supplements, compression garments for lymphedema, and transportation to clinical trial appointments 2 hours away. One afternoon while Mom napped, I ran into Ashley Reynolds at the local pharmacy. We'd been close in high school, but had drifted apart during college. She immediately noticed my exhaustion. "Jessica, are you okay? You look like absolute hell." I finished with a weary smile. "I heard about your mom," she said softly. "I'm so sorry." Somehow, standing in the vitamin aisle with a former friend, the simple acknowledgement of my situation broke something open inside me. Words tumbled out. About Mom's treatment, my job loss, Dad's absence, the mounting bills. Ashley listened without interruption, then simply hugged me. "Give me your number," she insisted. "I'm bringing dinner tomorrow." True to her word, she arrived the next evening with homemade lasagna and fresh bread. She visited regularly after that, sometimes just sitting with Mom, so I could take a shower longer than 3 minutes or go for a walk around the block. "You can't pour from an empty cup," she reminded me gently when I protested her help. During a rare good day, Mom and I sat in her garden, watching butterflies visit the zinnias she'd planted before her diagnosis. The August sun warmed our faces as I adjusted her sun hat. "I'm so sorry, Jessica," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For taking your life away. Your career, your relationship, your future. You've put everything on hold for me." "Mom, no. Let me finish," she said firmly. "I need you to know that I see the sacrifices you're making. I see how much you've given up. And I am so deeply grateful and so terribly sorry." I took her thin hand in mine. "I'm exactly where I need to be. Promise me something," she continued, her eyes serious. "When this is over, you'll rebuild. You won't let this year define the rest of your life." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That evening, I received a text from Tyler. After months of increasingly infrequent communication, his message was brutally clear. "I can't do this anymore. You've clearly chosen your path, and it doesn't include me. I've met someone else. I'm sorry." I stared at the phone, feeling strangely numb. The relationship that had once seemed central to my future now felt like a distant memory, belonging to a different Jessica from another lifetime. Later that night, after changing Mom's sheets for the 3rd time due to night sweats, I sat on my bedroom floor and allowed myself to imagine walking away. I could call my father, insist he hire professional help, book a flight somewhere, anywhere, and reclaim some fragment of my former life. The fantasy lasted approximately 30 seconds before shame washed over me. I was exhausted, not cruel. I could no more abandon my mother than stop breathing. The next morning, Eleanor Davis, our 80-year-old neighbor, knocked on the door with a casserole and an offer. "I may be old," she announced, "but I can sit with Margaret for a few hours. You need a break, young lady." Her kindness nearly undid me. "I couldn't impose." "Nonsense," she interrupted. "Margaret was there for me after Harold died. Now I'm here for her. And you." Eleanor's periodic relief allowed me precious hours to handle mounting paperwork, catch up on sleep, or simply sit in a coffee shop remembering what normal life felt like. During one such respite, I began a detailed journal documenting my caregiving activities. Initially intended as a medical reference for tracking symptoms, it evolved into a comprehensive record: medications administered, procedures performed, hours spent on care, expenses incurred. Something inside me, perhaps the former business executive, knew this documentation might someday prove important. 9 months after my mother's diagnosis, Dr. Patel called me into his office while a nurse sat with Mom during her treatment. Jessica, he said gently, it's time we discuss hospice care. The word landed like a physical blow. Hospice meant we were no longer fighting for recovery. Hospice meant preparing for the end. How long? I asked, my voice barely audible. With pancreatic cancer at this stage, weeks, possibly a few months. She's fought incredibly hard. Maria Gonzalez, the hospice nurse assigned to us, became our lifeline. Patient and knowledgeable, she taught me about comfort care, symptom management, and the progression we could expect. Your mother is lucky to have you, she told me one afternoon after demonstrating how to properly adjust the hospital bed we'd installed in the living room. Not everyone has someone willing to provide this level of care. With the transition to hospice came an unexpected change. My father and Pamela began visiting more frequently. Their sudden interest in Mom's condition might have seemed commendable, if not for their behavior during these visits. Should she be this medicated? Pamela asked critically, watching Mom sleep peacefully for the first time in days. She can barely hold a conversation. That's the point, I explained, fighting to keep my voice level. She's comfortable now. Well, when we visited last week, she was much more alert, my father added. I bit back the reminder that last week had been the first time they'd visited in over a month. During one such visit, I overheard my father on the phone with my aunt. Jessica insisted on being the one to care for her, he was saying. You know how she is, always had to be the martyr. The mischaracterization of my choice. Presented as some sort of attention-seeking behavior rather than necessary care, sent me reeling. I confronted him after the call. Martyr? I repeated. Is that what you think I'm doing here? He looked startled. I was just explaining the situation to your aunt. By lying about why I'm here? By pretending you gave me any choice when you were ready to ship Mom off to a facility before her first treatment even started? You're overwrought, he dismissed. This stress isn't good for anyone. The argument escalated when Pamela joined in, questioning my decision to increase Mom's pain medication. The hospice doctor prescribed it, I explained, holding the written instructions. Well, I've been reading about these medications and they can hasten death, she countered. Are you sure that's what Margaret would want? The implication was unbearable. Are you suggesting I'm trying to? I'm simply saying we should consider all perspectives, she interrupted smoothly. After all, we're family too. Family? I laughed bitterly. Where has family been for the past 9 months while I've been changing sheets at 3 a.m. and holding her hair back during vomiting episodes? The confrontation ended with slammed doors and seething silence. Mom, mercifully, had slept through it all, the medication cushioning her from the ugliness surrounding her. 2 days later, driving home from the pharmacy with Mom's prescriptions, I misjudged a turn and sideswiped a parked car. The damage was minor, but the police officer who responded took one look at me and asked, Ma'am, when was the last time you slept? I couldn't remember. Ashley arrived at the scene after I called her, insisted on driving me home, and then refused to leave until I'd seen a doctor. This isn't a request, she said firmly. You're falling apart. The doctor diagnosed extreme fatigue and beginning stages of caregiver burnout. Your blood pressure is concerning, he noted. If you don't get some rest, you'll end up hospitalized yourself. That evening, sitting beside Mom's bed, I held her hand while she drifted in and out of sleep. During one lucid moment, she looked directly at me. Jessica, she said clearly, you're the strongest person I know. I shook my head. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling powerful, she murmured. It's about continuing when you feel weakest. Later that night, while organizing Mom's dresser drawer, I found an envelope with my name written in her handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 3 months earlier. My dearest Jessica, it began. If you're reading this, I'm probably no longer able to tell you these things myself. I want you to know that in my entire life, nothing has humbled me more than watching your selfless love in action. You have given me the greatest gift, dignity and comfort in my most vulnerable time. When I tell people about my daughter, I don't talk about your achievements or your career. I tell them about your heart, how it's big enough to set aside your entire life to care for mine. There is no greater love than this. Please don't regret a single moment of this time. It has been the honor of my life to be loved so completely by you. I clutched the letter to my chest and wept. Mom passed away peacefully on a Sunday morning in early spring, almost exactly 1 year after her diagnosis. I was holding her hand, telling her about the daffodils blooming in her garden, when she took a final gentle breath and was gone. The moment held a terrible beauty, the release from suffering, the quiet dignity of her passing, the sunlight streaming through the window illuminating her face. Maria, the hospice nurse, had prepared me for this moment, yet nothing could truly ready me for the profound emptiness that followed. My father took control of the funeral arrangements immediately, barely consulting me despite my intimate knowledge of Mom's wishes. The service he planned was formal and impersonal, nothing like the simple, nature-centered memorial Mom had described to me during our late-night conversations. "Your father wants traditional," the funeral director explained apologetically when I questioned the elaborate casket and formal church service. I moved through the funeral in a state of emotional numbness, accepting condolences from people who had been notably absent during Mom's illness. Many approached with the same phrase, "Your father told us how insistent you were about being the primary caregiver." The narrative he'd constructed of my caregiving as some sort of controlling choice rather than a necessary response to their absence had clearly spread widely. My brother Brian, who had been deployed overseas with his military unit during most of Mom's illness, arrived for the funeral. His grief was complicated by guilt at his inability to help, though Mom had always been fiercely proud of his service. "I should have been here," he said as we stood beside her grave. Mom understood, I assured him. She kept your letters by her bed. A week after the funeral, while I was still staying at Mom's house and beginning the overwhelming task of sorting through her belongings, my father and Pamela arrived unannounced. "We need to discuss the house," my father began without preamble. "I'll be putting it on the market next month." I nodded, having expected this. The house had been my parents' joint property and now belonged to my father. "I'll have my things out before then." "About that," he continued, pulling a folded paper from his jacket, "we've calculated your portion of the household expenses during your stay." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My portion of what? Pamela smiled thinly. "You've been living here rent-free for a year, Jessica. Using utilities, consuming groceries." My father slid the paper across the kitchen table, an itemized list of expenses with a total circled at the bottom, $12,367. "This can't be serious," I said, staring at the document in disbelief. "We've been very fair," Pamela interjected. "We haven't included any wear and tear on the property." "I was here caring for Mom," I said slowly. "I gave up my job, my apartment, my relationship, everything, to be her caregiver." "That was your choice," my father replied. "No one asked you to sacrifice your career. You insisted on handling everything yourself." I felt a strange calm settle over me as the final pieces of my father's character came into focus. "I'll need some time to review this," I said, folding the paper. "Of course," he replied, standing to leave. "We can discuss payment arrangements when you're ready." After they left, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, the bill before me, trying to process this final betrayal. The sheer audacity of charging me for caring for my dying mother, their wife and mother, felt like a perversion of everything family should mean. That night, I pulled out the journal I'd been keeping throughout Mom's illness. Page after page documented the care I'd provided, medications administered, procedures performed, appointments managed, nights spent awake monitoring her breathing. Alongside these entries were careful records of expenses I'd covered personally: medical copays, specialized foods, comfort items, transportation costs. With methodical precision born from my corporate background, I began creating a document of my own. 3 days later, I requested a meeting at my father's house. Brian, having extended his leave to help with Mom's affairs, offered to accompany me. "You don't have to face them alone," he said. When we arrived, my father and Pamela were waiting in the formal living room, expressions carefully neutral. I placed a sealed envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" my father asked. My response to your bill, I replied calmly. Inside was a professionally formatted invoice titled Caregiving Services Rendered, with my former company's letterhead repurposed at the top. The itemized list included professional nursing care, 5,840 hours at $15 per hour equals $87,600 medication management. 1,095 instances at $15 each equals $16,425 transportation to 52 medical appointments at $50 each equals $2,600 24/7 on-call services for 365 days at $350 per day equals $127,750. Financial management and insurance coordination, 120 hours at $60 per hour equals $7,200 personal care assistance, 1,460 instances at $25 each equals $36,500 meal preparation, specialized medical diet. 1,095 meals at $20 each equals $21,900. The total came to $299,975, from which I deducted a family discount of $259,975, leaving a balance of exactly $40,000, the amount of Mom's life insurance policy that my father had received. This is absurd, my father sputtered, his face reddening. Is it? I asked quietly. You valued my time enough to bill me for it. I'm simply returning the courtesy. You can't possibly expect payment for caring for your own mother, Pamela interjected. Just as you can't possibly expect payment from me for living in her house while providing the care neither of you are willing to give, I replied evenly. My father stood abruptly. This is emotional manipulation. I won't be blackmailed by my own daughter. Robert, Brian's voice cut through the tension. I hadn't heard him enter from the hallway. Sit down. My father, surprised by his son's unexpected appearance, complied automatically. While I was deployed, Brian continued, I received weekly emails from Jessica. Detailed updates about Mom's condition, her treatments, her good days and bad. Do you know how many updates I received from you, Dad? My father remained silent. 3. Brian answered. 3 brief messages in an entire year. And now you have the gall to charge the one person who actually showed up? I placed my hand on Brian's arm, silently asking to continue myself. I didn't create this invoice because I expect payment, I explained. I created it to show you what family really means. Family isn't a balance sheet. It isn't a transaction. Mom understood that, even if you don't. I pulled out the letter Mom had written me. She left this for me. I'd like to read part of it to you. As I read her words about love and sacrifice, I watched my father's composure crack. For the first time since Mom's diagnosis, I saw genuine emotion break through his carefully maintained facade. She was my wife for 30 years, he whispered, his voice breaking. Then why weren't you there? I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine bewilderment. Because I couldn't bear it, he admitted, tears now flowing freely. Seeing her suffer, watching her fade away, I was a coward. It was easier to focus on work, on practical matters, than to face losing her. Pamela, looking uncomfortable with this display of vulnerability, quietly left the room. Fear doesn't excuse abandonment, I said gently. But I understand it. My father looked at the invoice again, then at me. You really did all this? Every day. Every day, Brian confirmed. Our sister became a nurse, a counselor, an advocate, and a companion while we were absent, Dad. Something shifted in my father's expression. A recognition, perhaps, of the depth of his failure and the magnitude of my sacrifice. The insurance money, he said slowly. Margaret would have wanted you to have it. For your future. We talked for hours that afternoon, the first real conversation we'd had in years. There were difficult moments, harsh truths spoken, and wounds that would take time to heal. But beneath the pain lay the possibility of understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. In the months that followed, I used Mom's modest inheritance and the insurance money to rebuild my life. Not returning to corporate marketing as everyone expected, but founding a small nonprofit providing resources and support for family caregivers, people thrust into impossible situations with little preparation or assistance. I named it Margaret's Garden, recalling how my mother had told me once that caring for plants and caring for people required the same essential qualities: patience, attention, and love without expectation of return. At our first fundraising event, I was stunned to see my father among the attendees, checkbook in hand. "It won't make up for everything," he said awkwardly, "but it's a start." The organization grew slowly but steadily. I hired Ashley as our outreach coordinator, and even Eleanor joined as a volunteer, offering wisdom from her decades of experience caring for her late husband. My mother taught me many things during her life, but it was in her illness and death that her most profound lessons emerged: that strength often looks like quiet endurance, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and that family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by who shows up when showing up matters most. So, I ask you, who in your life has shown up for you when it truly mattered? Or who have you shown up for during their darkest times? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their caregiving journey matters. Remember that your sacrifices are seen, even when they feel invisible. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to continue on days when you feel weakest.